America is trapped in a war it cannot win. In 30 days, the United States fired more than 850 Tomahawk cruise missiles into Iran. Each one costs up to $3.6 million. The country produces roughly 90 to 100 of them per year. That means the Pentagon burned through 5 to 8 years of Tomahawk production in a single month. 13 American service members are dead. More than 300 are wounded. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the most expensive warship ever constructed, has pulled out of the fight. And Iran is still standing, still launching retaliation attacks every single day. What you are watching was not improvised. Iran's strategy is the product of 4 decades of deliberate, patient construction, beginning the moment the Iran-Iraq War ended in 1988. 8 years of grinding conflict taught Iran one permanent lesson. You do not fight the West head-on. You spread out. You build leverage in places your enemy cannot easily reach. And that is exactly what Iran did. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, militia networks embedded deep across Syria. For 30 years, while the world fixed its attention on Iran's nuclear program, Iran was quietly placing pieces across the entire board. What America confronted on the 28th of February, when it launched Operation Epic Fury alongside Israel, was not the old Iran. The plan was clean and brutal. A decapitation strike to end this fast. Nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei killed. IRGC commanders eliminated. Air defenses destroyed. The Pentagon itself described the opening salvo as twice the firepower of the 2003 shock and awe campaign against Iraq. And for one brief moment, it looked like it had worked. But Iran did not collapse. The government kept functioning, the missiles kept launching, and Iran activated a pressure system across the entire region that no amount of Tomahawk missiles can switch off. Let's talk about the numbers, because the cost math alone will change the way you understand this war. A single Iranian Shahed 136 drone costs between $20 and $50. It is a motorized glider packed with explosives, assembled from off-the-shelf commercial parts. The Patriot PAC-3 interceptor used to shoot it down costs approximately $4 million. The THAAD interceptor, which handles higher altitude threats, runs between $12 and $15 million per shot. Iran sends a $50 drone. America spends $4 million to stop it. Iran has launched more than 20 of these drones into the region since the 28th of February. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimated that coalition forces burned through $1.7 billion in interceptors in just the first 100 hours. Across the first 16 days, the combined interceptor bill for the United States, Israel, and the Gulf states reached approximately $26 billion. And here's the detail that should alarm every defense planner on Earth. Lockheed Martin manufactures roughly 600 Patriot interceptors annually. That production rate cannot be scaled quickly, because the supply chain relies on single-source suppliers with lead times measured in months. Before Operation Epic Fury even began, Patriot stockpiles had already fallen to 25% of the level the Pentagon considered adequate drained by the 12-day war in June 2025 and the extended Houthi campaign in the Red Sea. Most people assume this war is defined by the air campaign over Iran. Thousands of sorties, 11 zero targets struck by U.S. Central Command, all of that firepower pouring into Iranian territory around the clock. But in reality, the decisive front of this war is not over Iran. It is a 21-mile-wide strip of water between Iran and Oman called the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran locked it down without firing a single anti-ship missile. What Iran did instead was deceptively simple. A small number of drone strikes on merchant vessels near the strait triggered a cascade through the global insurance market. By the 5th of March, every major marine insurer had pulled war risk coverage for vessels transiting the Gulf. No coverage means no commercial shipping. Tanker traffic collapsed by 70% almost immediately, then fell to functionally zero. Over 150 ships dropped anchor outside the strait and refused to move. The channel was physically open, but no ship owner on Earth could afford to send a vessel through without insurance. Analysts are calling it a phantom blockade, a situation where the financial system locks down the waterway before any physical barrier is even needed. 20 million barrels of oil flow through that strait every single day. That is 20% of the world's daily supply, and roughly 20% of global liquefied natural gas trade. More than $500 billion in energy commerce passes through there every year. When Iran choked it off, Brent crude surged from around $70 per barrel before the war to above $107 a gain of more than 50% in 30 days. The International Energy Agency called it the largest disruption to energy supply in the history of the global oil market. The IEA's 32 member nations unanimously agreed to release 400 million barrels from emergency reserves. It barely dented the trajectory. But Iran did not stop there. On top of the Hormuz shutdown, it built 2 additional layers of pressure running simultaneously. The first is direct military punishment on Israel waves of ballistic missiles and drones, striking Tel Aviv, hitting a radar and electronic warfare installation operated by Israeli defense firm Elta at Haifa's aerospace complex, and targeting fuel storage near Ben Gurion Airport. The second layer targets the Gulf Arab states hosting American forces. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Oman have all absorbed Iranian strikes. The UAE Ministry of Defense reported 941 Iranian drones detected since the war began. 65 of those penetrated its defenses and struck ports, airports, hotels, and data centers. Emirates Global Aluminum confirmed a direct hit that wounded workers and damaged production capacity. An Iranian missile attack on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia wounded multiple American service members. These are not accidents. These are not overshoot patterns. They are a calculated campaign designed to fracture the coalition America depends on. Iran is running a coordinated 3-axis strategy. Military strikes drain interceptor stockpiles. Gulf state attacks erode the political will of the very allies hosting American bases. And the Hormuz shutdown converts all of it into economic pain that reaches every voter, every gas station, and every stock exchange on Earth. Iran does not need to win a single battle. It needs to keep all 3 axes running until the cost becomes politically unsurvivable. U.S. stock markets have already fallen roughly 10% from pre-war highs. The OECD slashed its global growth forecast from 3.3% down to 2.9% and raised G20 inflation projections to 4%. The Philippines declared a national energy emergency, the first country in the world to do so. Australia made public transport free in 2 states just to offset fuel prices. And here is the part that connects the battlefield directly to your kitchen table. The Gulf region produces close to half the world's urea and roughly 30% of global ammonia output. 1/3 of the planet's fertilizer supply transits through the Strait of Hormuz. Urea prices have climbed 50% since the war started. Synthetic nitrogen fertilizers sustain approximately 48% of global food production. The mid-April deadline for Northern Hemisphere planting means that any disruption in March translates directly into reduced crop yields by September. This war is not just costing the military budget, it is repricing the global economy in real time. Now we come to the escalation card Iran has kept in reserve, and it has nothing to do with oil, missiles, or nuclear weapons. It targets something far more fragile. The Gulf states are not only petrostates. They are saltwater kingdom societies that survive by converting seawater into drinking water on an industrial scale every single day. More than 90% of Kuwait's and Bahrain's potable water comes from desalination plants. Roughly 86% of Oman's, about 80% of Israel's, around 70% of Saudi Arabia's. Across the Gulf, more than 400 desalination facilities supply water to approximately 100 million people. And over 90% of that output comes from just 56 megaplants clustered along coastlines, well within drone and missile range of Iran. Strikes on this infrastructure have already begun. On the 7th and 8th of March, a desalination plant on Iran's Keshm Island was hit, cutting water to 30 villages. Bahrain reported an Iranian drone strike on one of its own plants. Kuwait and the UAE have both logged damage near desalination sites. Iran's parliament issued a public warning. If Iran's power infrastructure is targeted, Iran will pursue the irreversible destruction of the Gulf's desalination and energy facilities. Iran itself runs on rivers, dams, and groundwater. It is far less dependent on coastal desalination than any of its neighbors. That asymmetry is the leverage, and Iran has not fully used it yet. Look at the military toll from America's side of the ledger. 30 days and 13 service members killed, over 300 wounded. 6 soldiers died in a single attack on Port Shuaiba in Kuwait. More than a dozen MQ-9 drones destroyed or damaged. 3 F-15Es lost in a friendly fire incident, a damaged F-35A, a fatal KC-135 tanker crash in Iraq. 5 more KC-135s damaged by Iranian missiles at an airfield in Saudi Arabia. An F-35 worth up to $100 million made an emergency landing after a combat sortie. The first 6 days alone cost $11.3 billion, according to a closed-door Pentagon briefing to Congress. Donald Trump has requested $200 billion from Congress to continue this campaign. And public support? In the latest Reuters Ipsos poll, 35% approved of the U.S. strikes on Iran, 61% disapproved. Then, on the 28th of March, the war expanded again. Yemen's Houthis fired ballistic missiles at Israel for the first time since the conflict began. Air raid sirens sounded across Beersheba. The missiles were intercepted, but the Houthis announced they would continue striking until, in their words, the aggression on all resistance fronts stops. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, at the southern end of the Red Sea, is 16 miles wide. About 12% of global trade passes through it. Saudi Arabia had been rerouting millions of barrels of crude through Red Sea ports because Hormuz was already closed. If the Houthis now shut down Bab el-Mandeb the way they choked it during the Gaza War, when they attacked over 100 merchant vessels and forced Suez Canal traffic down by 70%, then both of the Middle East's major energy corridors go dark at the same time. Last year, the United States spent $1 billion bombing Houthi positions. The group sank 2 more ships after the bombing stopped. The United States launched the largest air campaign since 2003. It called it twice the firepower of shock and awe. It killed Iran's supreme leader. It struck over 11 zero targets. And 30 days later, Iran still controls the Strait of Hormuz. It is still launching missiles. It is still draining American interceptor stockpiles with drones that cost less than a mid-range car. The war bill has passed $18 billion, and the request to Congress is $200 billion more. The USS Gerald R. Ford has been pulled from frontline operations. Fertilizer prices are up 50%. Oil is above $107 a barrel. The Houthis have opened another front, and not a single country on earth has joined the United States in a combat coalition. The stated objective was regime change. The regime survived. The stated objective was to neutralize Iranian military power. Iran fires more ordnance into the region today than it did in week 1. The question is no longer whether Iran can endure this war. It has already endured 30 days of bombardment that no country in modern history has absorbed at this scale. The real question, the one no one in Washington wants to answer, is whether America can afford to keep prosecuting a war with no coalition, no exit strategy, no defined victory condition, and an adversary whose entire military doctrine was built around one single principle: don't win, just don't lose.